Spirit. Christ is in our midst. I found it interesting the other day. I was walking into a store, and I saw a woman carrying a toddler car seat and holding the hand of her other small child, and they were walking up to the store, and they were waiting to go into the store, and I saw a person coming out who seeing them, walked through another door and just kind of departed the store and left this woman standing there with all the luggage that young mothers have. And I thought to myself, as this mother put down the car seat and opened the door and had her one child go in and then picked up the car seat, held the door propped open with her elbow, and walked into the store, I thought, we see that all the time. We see that not only in the gospel reading for today, but we also see it in a term that we hear so frequently called bystander apathy. And we see that with people on the road. Thank God for the invention of cell phones, because most people would just be standing there waiting forever for someone to come and help them with a flat tire or a broken down car or whatever the emergency might be. But most times now, whether it's from either the world, how much evil exists in the world that we choose to be apathetic, or whether it's just by rushing around in our lives, we see an apathy that is rampant in society and maybe even rampant in our life. As I think about my education as a priest, and I think about my education as a chaplain for the police, I remember just recently being certified for CPR. And one of the first things that you learn during CPR is call 911. That's the first thing you learn. Not to do anything else first, but call 911. And you think about if there's an emergency or something that's going on in our lives, sometimes we forget what our training is, or maybe we haven't been trained a specific way to react to a situation. If you saw somebody laying on the floor, you might just yell at them and not check for a pulse, or you might forget to call 911 and do something else. Sometimes I remember being a young altar boy and passing out in one of the services and waking up with a colludi in my mouth. And that's a true story. And I think, what was happening to me while I was out, what was being forced into my mouth. And I woke up and I said, what is this? But sometimes we lose track of what is really important. We become apathetic. We might, unfortunately, even become apathetic in the church. And seeing what the church as a whole does and what some other churches do, some other faiths, we as Christians are really not as hot as we should be. Now, what I mean by that is we're not on fire with God like we should be. We're not as prepared as we need to be, and we're not as trained as we need to be. Next week is what Sunday of the year? What's the specific Sunday? Anybody know? Stewardship Sunday. Thank you very much, all four of you. It's Stewardship Sunday next week, and I'm not standing here today preparing you to sign over your life, your financial life to the church, because that's not what the church needs in whole. The church in whole needs you to sign over your soul to God. That's the most important thing. The most important thing is that you are not apathetic to the callings of the church. It's interesting that in the stewardship, this is the brochure for 2005. And the stewardship, it asks for the information here, and on the inside it says circle what ministries you're interested in. And many cards that come back, I look and they're not circled at all, or there's just a few circled. And I sit there and I think, well, is it just about the finances that you think stewardship is about? Or is it that you're not interested in the ministries, or that you don't know what they are? So last year we created the welcome packet and the brochure on the church so that you would know all the ministries. And it's amazing that some people that are new to our church, or even visiting, know more about some of the ministries that are offered than some people who have been here for an extremely long period of time. I'm not saying that in criticism, but I'm saying that as we cannot be apathetic and bystanders in our own church. There's a Saint Thomas More who's recognized in another faith, and on his way to his execution, he came to the scaffold and turned to the executioner and said, "Would you mind helping me get up? Because I can get down by myself." Now, each one of us in this church has the ability to rise above whatever the persecution is, whatever the apathetic standing is, and to move on closer to God and to become closer to Him. But just like we had mentioned the other night in our IUS meeting, which is the adult fellowship group, that many times we confuse our roles in the church. We confuse not only the gender role, but sometimes we don't know how we fit in. And many times people say, well, why can't women be priests? Why can't women be altar girls? And why is the priest the only one allowed behind the altar to be the priest? And all these things in testing what the roles of people are. Now that's another session and another sermon in itself. But what I ask you today is whether or not you are a woman or a man, what is your role in this church? Have you found your role in this community? I think that each one of us, no matter how much we think we found it, we really haven't. We haven't come to the point where we look at our lives and say, I am involved, I am learning, I am growing spiritually, I am liturgically active, I am liturgically prompt, I am receiving the sacraments, and I am becoming closer to God. I don't know who really can say that they are doing all those things and that everything is perfect and I don't need any help. None of us can say that. And like I tell people, we can self-prescribe ourselves. We can go into a pharmacy, we can go into Walgreens, and we can say, I have a cold, and you read the box, and it says, to sleep better or for a fever. And you pull it off the shelf, you take it home, you take it. But like I tell people, I've never seen anybody in a Walgreens missing a limb with gauze or a towel wrapped on it looking for a home suture kit or an arm replacement kit in a Walgreens. You never see that because it becomes more serious. And the more serious our illnesses become, we go to a specialist. And our spiritual illnesses that we all have, that we all struggle with, whether or not we care to identify them or whether we care to bury them under the carpet, each one of us needs to reach out to the church, to reach out to the writings of the church and the teachings of the church so that we can know how to be healed. And how to be healed starts with being involved, being spiritually involved. Is that Batman theme? If it's God, tell him I'll be right with him. We all need to be involved, and we all need to embrace the sacraments of the church, and we need to learn. There's no worse sin, I believe, than being apathetic. Because if you just don't care, if you think you know enough, if you think you've done enough, if you think you are more than everyone else, then you are lukewarm and, as I say so often, will not make it into the kingdom of heaven. That's not me saying that, but it's the book of Revelation that says that. We have to try to learn, to become closer to God, to use what the church teaches us so that we can embrace Him each and every day of our life. There's a story about this little first grader, and the boy's teacher tells the story and says, "What does your older brother play on the football team?" And the boy thought for a moment and proudly answered, "I'm not real sure what it's called, but I think he's a drawback." How many times in our lives, if someone comes up to you and says, "You're an Orthodox Christian, what do you do in your church?" How many times are we drawbacks? How many times do we look at ourselves and really know what we do and how we contribute to the church? In today's gospel reading, we hear about the Samaritan who went up to the man and said, "I'll take care of him. I'll take the initiative to make a difference. And whatever it costs, I'll take care of that too." That's what our church says about stewardship. I'll take care of the church. Whatever it costs, I will take care of that too. And the Bible tells us, go and do likewise. That's what Christ's command was. So it's not just about money. Everyone thinks that the priest gets up every year and he talks about money, or every Sunday and he says, put $1 in the tray and don't let George Washington be alone, and let's celebrate Abraham Lincoln's birthday and all these things. But if your heart is there, and if you breathe the church, if you breathe the ministries of the church and you embrace them, then money it's a secondary thing. How many of you with your children have said, oh, my child broke its arm. I'm not going to take him to the hospital because we have a $500 deductible. Never do that. How many of us, when we make dinner, say, let's not buy butter because it costs too much money? It's not on sale this week. Let's just have dry toast. Or your children, you don't need milk. Let's water it down. We don't do that for the things that we need. And what we have to realize is our church is something that we need. It's not just a good idea, it's the path to salvation. Now, if you could sit and think, all of you in this church today are sitting in a boat. The nave of the church is a boat. For anyone who's ever purchased any Nautica clothes should know that word comes from the Greek word. Now, if you think that you're all in this boat, we're all moving closer to God. Even the priest faces the direction towards God in leadership for the community. He's the captain of the ship, leading towards Christ. Are you ready to row? Do you know where you're rowing? Are you waiting for someone next to you to grab the oar because you don't think you need to row? Or are you sitting and thinking, well, this will be a good ride, let's see where it goes? Or I want to get out. The unfortunate thing is, if this were a boat, many of us wouldn't be on it if we were sailing. Because, as you all know, you have to be on the boat when it departs from the shore. And each one of us needs to not just get on and off this boat, but we have to realize that the ministries of the church are what keep us involved. Growth keeps us involved. The teachings of the church keep us involved. And the sacraments of the church keep us holy. Those are very important things to remember. So why did I bring up being prepared? Because next week I don't want you to come to church, or maybe you might avoid church because you know it's Stewardship Sunday, but I don't want you to come to church and say, I don't know what to do. I don't know what ministries I need to be involved in or what I should be approaching. I'm a woman. What is the philoptikos? We hear that all the time at the meetings. We get emails. What is philoptikos? It's there. We just have to reach out and learn these different programs. And I don't want you to come to church next week without an idea of what you need to give to God. Not just money, but what you need to give of your heart, your commitment, your life to God. Because He has given His life for us. We can either choose to pick and choose what we want in the religion. I choose to come to church this Sunday. I choose to fast this day and not these other days. And I choose to listen to this part of the teachings of the church or this commandment, and this one I need to... We can't do that. It's not a buffet. The church is not a buffet. We have to take the whole meal. We have to be prepared to eat it. And we have to sit and dine with God as the great banquet is equated to the kingdom of heaven. So next Sunday when you come to church, you're all going to receive one of these when you walk in the door. And you're going to receive a pen. And I don't want you to just look at it and say, oh, here we go. And what's this say? I don't want you to do that. I want you to know ahead of time, I want to be active with this group. I want to participate with this. I want to help out with the Sunday school, or I want to do these things. I want to learn more about the different avenues of helping the church, and I want to show that also by my financial giving to the church. You know, I put this quote on the back that's from 1 Corinthians, and I thought it was appropriate we read from Corinthians today, which is a beautiful reading from St. Paul. And it says, St. Paul says, on the first day of every week, Sunday, each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with his income. That's not my words, that's St. Paul. But I also remind you to set aside part of your life during the week to be prepared to come to church, no matter if it's on Sunday or if it's for a special program or a presentation or a special ministry or a special outreach. And I want you to just envision right here, sitting on top of the pulpit, a can of food. It's not here. And our food pantry, unfortunately, doesn't have as much food as we could be putting in it. So I ask you, next Sunday, when you come to church, to please bring your food and put it up here. Put it right by the pulpit, right on the floor, right in front of the evangelist, so that we can be reminded of that ministry of giving. It's not about money. It's about everything else, and money ties into that. But it's about giving of our life, giving of our love. And hopefully when other parishioners come and see the can of food that you have brought, they'll say, "What's that there for?" Because obviously we don't see the basket in the hallway. We are bystanders and apathetic to that. Because there's so many ministries in this church that are right there. They're tripping distance. The Sermon Sunday box is sticking out from the wall, and if you're 4'8", you're going to bang your head on that box. But that box has been empty for the past few months. Why? You know the answer to that. I don't. These things are here. The ministries of the church are here. You can either choose to be a bystander and apathetic, or you can choose to indulge yourself, to grow, to learn, to become closer to God, and to move this ship forward closer to the kingdom of heaven. As Christ reminded us in the gospel today, go and do likewise. Amen.